On today's Maker Mashup, we're reviewing the Artillery Sidewinder X1 version 4 3D printer. Today we're going to be reviewing the Artillery Sidewinder X1 3D printer. Now, as you can see, this is a larger 3D printer. It is a larger format. It has a 0.4 nozzle, but it is also a 300 by 300 by 400 build volume, which you can see is pretty substantial. I was able to print this on this printer. Now, with this larger printer, it is the 4th revision of it, and Artillery has made some changes over the years with this particular printer. And we're going to be putting it through its standard review process that we do on this channel, giving ratings in different areas. And then at the end, I will also give my personal summary of what I feel about the printer. But overall, I will be giving you the information about the printer, allowing you to really make the decision on whether or not this printer is right for you. So with all that said, let's get to work. The box on this printer is very large and heavy, but everything is packaged really well on the inside. The good news is you only have to remove a couple of very large parts, and once they're out of the box, you should be good to go for setup. The accessory bag comes with a replacement ribbon cable, USB cable, and the other assorted tools, nuts, and bolts for the complete assembly. There's a nice full-size flash drive as well. Like most of these printers, we just have a couple of parts to assemble with some bolts. We're going to go ahead and attach the uprights to the base unit here, and then once that's done, we're going to move on to the spool holder. This is just a couple of bolts here, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. Once the spool holder's together, then we're just going to go ahead and start plugging everything in. We got our filament runout sensor here, and then we're going to go ahead and plug in the end stops. There's one down here, and then we've got to plug in the stepper motors as well. Overall, the assembly goes pretty quick. After we've got everything all wired up, we're going to need to raise the carriage. Once the carriage is raised up here, then we can install these ribbon cables. One goes into the base of the unit, and make sure that these are flat and straight going in, and then there's another one on the carriage. Once you've finished all of this, the assembly is complete and we're ready for our first print. Okay, so let's give it an assembly rating. The printer is very, very big. It is going to take you a little bit of time to maneuver things into place, but overall, assembly does go really quick, and it only took about 15-20 minutes to get this printer assembled. So with that, we're going to give it an assembly rating of an 8. Now that everything's assembled, we're going to move on to bed leveling. Despite being the 4th version of the Sidewinder X1, it still has manual bed leveling. We're going to manually bed level this here with our index card, but I can say for other printers I've seen at half the price, there are automatic bed leveling features available. So this was a real ding on the feature list for the Sidewinder X1. I was not able to find sample prints on the SD card, so I sliced up a calibration cube in Cura. Now, I was hopeful that this was going to go well, and the print was printing fairly well until a little bit further down the road, it lost adhesion to the build surface itself. So I thought I would give something else a try and decided a Benchy. The Benchy encountered the exact same issue with the surface. Everything seemed to be going fine, but then it failed again. As a last-ditch effort, I tried a little glue stick, but that had the same problem as well. Having no more patience for this, I decided it would just be easier to throw a PEI sheet on the top so I can get the adhesion that I really needed out of this bed. Once I had the PEI sheet in place, I had no further problems getting prints to stick, and I was able to review the rest of this printer. Overall, I think the print quality here looked a little mediocre. I was very surprised to see banding here based on the way that they set up their Z-axis. The Sidewinder X1 joins their Z-axes together with a belt, which should in theory reduce this, but the amount of banding that I saw on this was very surprising. Artillery also says that they have this proprietary Z connector which is supposed to improve overall Z quality. Most of the prints came out this way, where there were some subtle Z-banding issues on everything. And I did try it on a couple of different prints to rule out some sort of texture on the outside of the print. You can even see the same issues here in this vase mode print that I did, which maxed out the build area. Now, what I also do with the vase mode is I went ahead and tried to run at the maximum 150 millimeters a second that Artillery said is the maximum speed that you can print at. And you can see here the results of that, missing holes and a whole lot of problems. So even though the printer is set up for higher speed printing, you can clearly see that there's a lot of work to do to get high speed out of this printer. Now let's take a look at the inside. You can see here a solid state relay for the bed. That's going to get it to heat up faster, and it's got a very modest power supply here for everything else. I was really shocked to find an MKS Gen L version 1 in here. This is only an 8-bit board. The other thing that I saw in here that really shocked me is look at all of the glue attached to every single hodgepodge connector. Then, what's even worse is the front display is a 32-bit display. Given this is the 4th version of this printer, I would have expected a 32-bit board and far better wiring and far less hot glue on the inside of this printer. This was not the last of the confusing things on this printer for me. The USB flash drive here is just asking to get ripped off and broken on this printer. As I've mentioned in some of my other videos, I've never been a fan of this ribbon cable approach to 3D printers, and the fact that they supplied an extra one, to me, says that this is going to fail at some point. The end stops on this printer are inductive, and I really don't know why they chose an inductive one. And then if you look under the bed, they've included an aluminum foil wrapping around that. I ended up at least one time having this wrapping come down and trigger the end stop prematurely. I also was not a big fan of the way that they wired up the bed here. You can see that it's crinkling already, and to me that sounds like a point of failure. One of the other problems with this bed, because it is solid glass and not aluminum, is that it has inconsistent heating, which that aluminum foil and foam is trying to correct. Now, if I measure here in the center, I'm seeing 65, and I set this print to 70. Now, getting over to the edge here, you'll see it drops down 10 degrees Celsius. That inconsistent heating means that you're not going to have a surface that's going to stick well in all places, and that could have been my problem with the glass bed from the start of this video. With this big bed though comes big build volume, and I tested the full 400mm height, which you can see here goes to the very top of the printer itself. Like other printers that say they have a very large print volume, this one also does not take into account the full 400mm height of the area. You can see here how it's had to bend excessively to reach the extruder. This excessive bend you can see going into the geared extruder is caused by this angle that's created at the full build height. So be warned if you do get this printer that using the full 400mm height could cause damage to the extruder or cause your print to fail when you use the full print volume. Another point of frustration was the 2 screws that you're going to have to reach on in the back of the printer to adjust for the size filament spool that you're going to be using. This just seemed ridiculous. I also tested out the power failure recovery, and there was a bit of an oddity with this as well. While powering it off and recovering seemed to work okay, when the display came back on, it gave me an error message telling me that it could not find a file on the disk. So originally I thought things were broken. However, pressing the confirm button did restart my print, but the fact that this is confusing really would be frustrating for a new 3D printer user. The good news is both the power recovery feature and the filament runout sensor work successfully in my testing. So while the messages are confusing, the good news is it does actually work. Okay, so let's put some ratings behind this, and we'll start with features and quality. First, we're going to talk about some of the good things. I love the geared extruder. I love that it's got a volcano nozzle, and I really love the big area. So those are real pluses. However, the bed is made out of glass, and for me, that is really a no-go. It really didn't work well, and you're locked into it forever unless you're going to completely replace it with a magnetic sheet and a PEI or something along those lines. I just think your options are truly limited with it. And for that, I definitely think that is a negative part of the printer. Now, the aluminum underneath it that is triggering those inductive sensors, I really think that's another negative here. And the spool holder, to me, very small thing that is so easy to do correct on a printer, yet for a version 4, this particular spool holder for me doesn't work. So when I look at the features and quality on this printer, the best I can rate this is a 6. Now let's talk about our first print. Now, it started out okay, and I was starting to get a good experience with the printer, but the fact that it popped off, and after repeated attempts, I was unable to get a successful print off the glass, to me, that really puts a bad experience for the user, and especially for new 3D printer users. So for as far as the first print, I'm going to give it a 1. The print quality overall seemed very mediocre for this price range, and for that, I'm only going to give this a 6. For a printer with a $400 price tag, I would expect to do very limited upgrades, but yet there's things on this printer that you can upgrade and things you can't. The 3D printer main board is probably an $80 upgrade, and it was one, if you got this printer, one of the first ones that I would do. However, you have things like the PEI sheet, which makes it a little bit more difficult when you have a glass bed. Now, while you can stick that on there, switching surfaces then becomes a little bit more difficult. So from my opinion, an upgrade on this is probably not something you would want to do, but the ability to upgrade it really is only about a 6. This printer really does look like it's made for tinkering. However, in my opinion, it's not. There's far too many proprietary components on here to make upgrading and modifying the printer easy. So I'm going to rate the class of this printer as a tool 3D printer. This gives us an overall printer rating of a 5.4, or when rounded, down to a 5. Okay, so let me talk about my personal feelings about this printer. I think most everyone have watched this entire video knows I'm really not a fan of this printer. I was super excited about it. I was really looking forward to the latest version. This is the V4. So in theory, Artillery has fixed a lot of the issues that they had. From an upgrade standpoint, I have real concerns about this printer because it uses these proprietary cables here. So to me, this puts it more in a tool category than a tinker category. The other things I really didn't like about this printer is that it is using an 8-bit board, but the touch screen on the front is a 32-bit display. Doesn't make any sense to me. For $430, in my opinion, you could build a printer from the ground up for $430 and have more features and better features, in my opinion. The main board in here is an MKS Gen L version 1. It's 8-bit. It's running the old version 1 of Marlin. So you're kind of using out-of-date technology as well. So I wasn't a really big fan of that. From an upgrade standpoint, even if I put a new main board in there, which that would be probably one of the very first things I would change on this printer, other than the spool holder, I would immediately want to change out that main board to a 32-bit board. And that way you would be able to then benefit from the volcano nozzle that is in here and the geared extruder, which is another thing that really didn't make sense to me. You've got the ability to, in theory, print at high speeds, but because of the 8-bit board, it's really going to also limit you, as you can see here, when you're doing a lot of curves, because all of those computations that need to take place. So a better processor, a 32-bit processor, would be a lot better than something like this. Like a 1.4 SKR Turbo would be a good quick replacement for this printer. Now, the other things, like I said, if you were looking to upgrade this, ribbon cable is not going to help you. You've got basically a proprietary extruder setup here. The Aero extruder you could easily upgrade with maybe an original one, but rewiring it is now nearly impossible because they went the ribbon cable route. The other problem here too is because bed leveling and this glass bed that was on here was so unpredictable. I would recommend a BL Touch, but now you've got to more or less hack a BL Touch in here and then wire it into the main board. So overall, I would not recommend this printer. I just think that for the $430, there is a lot of other printers in the market space where you could either buy a smaller printer and upgrade those features to include, let's say, a geared extruder, or look at building something a little bit better than this. So that is my opinion of this printer. I've given you really all the details about it, so you're more than welcome to make your own informed decision. I would also like to hear about your comments. Do you have an Artillery Sidewinder? I saw a lot of different Amazon reviews, very mixed, some positive, some negative. So if you've got one of these printers or was thinking about getting one, I'd love to hear it down in the description. So with that, it's going to bring the end of today's video. If you liked it, make sure you mash that like button and don't forget to share and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming 3D printer review videos. So with all that said, I want to say thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.